unity again, rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
African, not American, is how we reppin' shit. With the squad, forward always, taking back our politics, refusing to back down the lies, spewing from these colonists. We know the truth, deception works no more, about to run this shit. Freedom from oppression on our land, stop the capping. We coming for y'all's heads, centuries long, get the packing. Africa is our motherland, it's time to take a stand against the systems of oppression, racism, and fascist hands. Unrelentless strength we feel with, learn from the best, check the reference. Pan-African is the essence of the consciousness we live in. Yeah, don't get it twisted, cause we ain't forgetting the way our ancestors fought for us with resilience. AAPRP, we Africans, here to free our peeps. What's happening? Kicking knowledge, the capitalists. AAPRP, we Africans. AAPRP, we Africans, here to free our peeps. What's happening? Kicking knowledge, the capitalists. AAPRP, we Africans.
We are not American, that shit's embarrassing. Africa's our heritage, you should truly cherish it. Fighting for the day that this government perishes. Terrorists, rep 2 A's, PRP, that's the set. What we rep, that's the code to the death. You don't know, learn respect, break the chains of the debt. In my veins, in my flesh, motherland, nothing less. We the earth dispossessed, aiming first for your neck.
You have, in more recent years, been affiliated with the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Are you still affiliated?
I am still affiliated with the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, which was founded by Kwame Nkrumah, whose objective is Pan-Africanism, the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism, and whose ideology is Nkrumah's tourism. And I shall stay with this party forever.
Greetings. Hello. Hope you are well. Really hope you're well. Hope you're arriving at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. Hopefully, you're already there or rapidly approaching. We're so happy that you have decided to join us for this very important episode. They're all very important. Um, of Our Ancestors' Voices, this weekly program that is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Our critical topic today, the unknown work of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. Ruby Doris Smith Robinson was executive secretary of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And as I've said, in my humble opinion, many times, I believe SNCC was one of the most, if not the most important organization in the 20th century in this backward cesspool country. And she was the person who, during the most tumultuous years of SNCC's activism, was oftentimes behind the scenes ensuring that the work could take place. So, really, one of the unsung sheroes of our movement. And we're going to talk about her today because it's important that we know who she is. And I wanted to, of course, give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. This is their lands, have been stolen from them. And just like us as African people, they have been placed in a political reality where everything they do is gauged and evaluated based on where it stands in relationship to the capitalist system, to the colonial system. And this is an impossible position to be in because the best case result is that you mimic the people enslaving and oppressing you. Um, within the system, that's the best case result. The best case result for us is that we fight and overthrow that system. But while we're doing that, the system we're fighting against will never do anything except gaslight you and make it seem as if you're the problem. For example, saying that indigenous people are alcoholics, and saying that African people commit the majority of the crime in this backward society. That those types of backward reactionary things that have no context, no analysis, and for the most part aren't even true. So that's important to recognize as we acknowledge them. I this past week had to serve on a jury trial. It was a murder trial. And people have asked me, since it ended on Friday, a lot of people have asked, why did you do it? Why didn't you get out of it? And I certainly know how to get out of something like that. And I have done that before. But this particular time, I had to ask myself a question because 20 something years ago, I did that. I got out of serving on a case, and it really, to be honest, haunted me since that time, because I always wondered if the person, then it was a heinous trial as well, heinous crime being accused. And I always wondered if they did it, I could have been in a position to ensure they weren't able to do it to anyone else. And if they didn't do it, I could have been in a position to help ensure that they weren't unjustly punished. And I know some of you out there, like, you don't, we're all abolitionists, but we're revolutionaries on this side. So there are many people that need to be punished. Okay. And there's a process that we go through, that revolutionary societies go through to do that in a just way. But anyway, I had to do this because I answered these people and I told them, if it were you who was on trial, and if you're one of those people that say, well, it would never be me, then, you're either living in a fantasy world or you just don't do a damn thing. But for those of us who, stand up, then it's always potential that we could be in that position for any variety of reasons. And so, the people asking me that are all activist people. So I answered them. I said, well, what if it were you up there? Who would you want deciding your fate? So that's why I didn't try to sabotage it. I did it. I ended up being the foreperson. They elected me to be the foreperson. And I think that, everybody involved in this case was indigenous. And so I felt like I needed to, step up and do that. And, I'm not a magician. So, the facts were the facts. I wasn't able to make that any different in the end result, but I was able to ensure that the group had to turn over every stone and think about every possibility. And I talked a lot about, the cultural considerations and the system of colonialism. I don't give a damn if they didn't want to hear it, and a lot of them didn't want to hear it. I didn't give a damn, but that's my role for being there. And once all of that was done, and the decision was made, and it wasn't favorable to the people who were accused, and there was a preponderance of evidence against them. There was video evidence. So, even for myself, it was impossible to say, well, no, they didn't do that. But at the same time, I think I did what I could, and I would do it again, because if it happens again in the future, it may be a situation where there isn't a preponderance of evidence, and that's where I could play a role, and that's where you could play a role in terms of making sure that our people are not unfairly and unjustly targeted by this system. So I'm not trying to hear people, the kind of people that say this kind of stuff are people that really don't ever do anything to put themselves at risk, And the last thing I'll say about that is I got up there. They ask you if you're pro-police, and all these people got up and they're pro-police, all this nonsense. And then they asked who has a bias against police, and I was the only one that got up. And I said, I don't support any of these institutions in this society. I don't support police. I don't support this court system. I don't support any of it. And this is all public information, because I know a lot of you, like you don't do anything, so you think everybody's like you. You think everybody doesn't do anything, like you don't do a damn thing. So, this is all public information. So if you don't believe me, you could reach out Sacramento Superior Court. You have a right as a so-called citizen of this society, and you can say, they record everything. You can say, I want to get the transcripts from this trial. It was the people against Amorato and what was the other guy's name? Amorato and Santabanez. You can ask for that. And if you do that, you'll hear me up there. I have to identify myself. And I told them, I don't have any faith to any of these institutions, but I know truth. I know the difference between truth and a lie, and I will always be honest. So there it is. So you can take that and do what it is. But I think that, I tried to, when I saw who the defendants were, and I saw the people who were going to be in the position to judge them, I knew then that I had to do the best I could to ensure that as much justice as possible was carried out. And of course, our African ancestors, we mentioned last week the physical transition of Baba Sekou Neblet, and we certainly encourage you to study his tremendous contributions to our people's struggle. We lost a warrior, an icon. He was living in Ghana, just like Assata Shakur. I'm thankful that he was able to live out the last several decades of his life in peace in Africa, where he should have been, or where I should be, and where you should be, whether you know it or not. But he was able to do that, and for that, I'm eternally grateful. I'm eternally grateful that I humbly had the privilege to support him being able to do that. And so, I'm at peace with him no longer being here, 82 years old, but now I have the heightened responsibility to continue the work in his honor, because he's not here to do the work for himself anymore. So we have to carry that forward. So honored to be able to do that. And we just appreciate those that come and participate. This program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, APRP. APRP is a revolutionary independent mass Pan-African political party with a base in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, defined as one unified socialist Africa. And you might ask, well, why does he say this every week? We heard this, we know it. Because even though I say it, people who know me and know my politics reach out to me every week, and they ask me, well, what do you think about this person being elected into this office? And I'm like, I don't care. I don't give a damn. I don't. Like, I'm not asking you, what do you think about, this organizing technique we have to organize for revolution? Because I know that's not your focus. So I don't know why you keep asking me that. I can give you feedback on how to effectively organize a movement to hold this backward political establishment accountable to us. But beyond that, I'm not the least bit interested, especially the way it's structured right now, where it's about voting for some cracker, some graham cracker, and then just hoping that they fulfill the promises they make to us, which they never do. I have zero interest in that. So that's why we have to make it clear who we are and what our focus is. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you read it yourself, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't really understand it. You got to read that in a group of people who are involved with the work so you can understand how the words translate into practical reality. So I encourage you to do that, and then you can understand what we're talking about when we're saying organizing for Pan-Africanism. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week, different variations by myself, Ajamu, and daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. This week and next week will be in our typical format where I do this and then the last part of the program. And then the week after that, we have Shakur coming up again for another one where she's primarily doing it. And we're just going to continue to find ways to do the program differently. But at this point, I will stop and hand it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Greetings, everyone. Hello, hello. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us. We are so excited to speak to you today about a particular individual. But first, before we get into talking about Miss Ruby, we need to start with reminding you, because we have done seminars on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee before, but it begs to be repeated. Some of you may not have heard of those seminars before. You may not have tuned in the past. And it's a really amazing organization, and it has been tremendously influential actually into the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So it's really important to talk about SNCC, to talk about their legacy, and to talk about how they have impacted every single one of us that is on this broadcast right now tuning in. So we first need to start with understanding that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was founded by Ella Baker. And the initial start was a founding conference that took place at Shaw University in 1960. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was a vision of Ella Baker, if you would, in terms of giving youth an opportunity to have a space where they could organize independently, right, of the influence of the more conservative ministers who dominated that movement at the time. And I really, really, really want to stress this, because one of the things that I adore, appreciate, and admire, I love using assemblies. I adore, appreciate, and admire the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, because they helped students to understand not only that they had a responsibility and an opportunity, but to help them understand what their power is. And I think for a lot of us, I think we think that we need to, be major people. We need to be big shots. We need to be affluential people. We need to be, up and coming. We need to be this. We need to be that in order to make change, and in order to do something, and in order to cause change, and to change the way systems work, and to push against them, to resist them. You don't have to be a big shot to do these things. You might be a person who people know, and you might have a huge social media calling, or you may not be a person that people know. It's not about how much influence and power you have on people. It's about your humanism that you have inside of yourself. It's about your humanity, and it's about the fact that you know the difference between right and wrong. As Baba Ajamu just pointed out, you can critically be able to dissect that. You can analyze it, and you understand that compassion and humanity, not only for self, because we need compassion for ourselves, but also for humanity, is the driving force as to why we push against systemic oppression every single day. You're either a part of the solution or you're a part of the problem. So we have to kind of think more about that, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not important enough to make a difference. And that's simply not true. And it's also kind of an excuse. So we have to really dissect that. Why do you feel that way? And really break that down. And if you're not sure, or if you're hesitant, just think of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They allowed students to understand that they had a responsibility and a role to play. These were students, you all. They had not graduated yet. They still needed to go to school, to go to classes, and they still found time to organize while they were doing all these things. Like, we really have to think about that. They put their lives on the line and they still found a way to study for their tests and get to school the next day. That's a big deal, you all. And a lot of times when I'm talking about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that is the first thing that I mention. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Not people who have mortgages and loans, but students who were making a change and standing up for what was right, you all. How humbling is that? To know that these are people who were probably half our age, who wanted to make a difference. And thank you to Miss Ella Baker for wanting to create a space for them to do that. That is so important. We need to really break that down and process that, really, really process that. So from that conference and moving forward, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was a central force in terms of helping to organize freedom rides, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the sit-in movement, the 1965 Immigration Reform Act. There were two pivotal civil rights campaigns, one, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as of 1964, and the Lowndes County Freedom Organization of 1965. And this particular organization just had a lot of influence, not only on some of the work that was happening all throughout the United States, but don't forget, a lot of times when we're talking about why we need to be connecting everybody's struggles together, so why we should be standing with Cuba, even if we don't identify as being Cuban, right? Why we should be standing, excuse me, with Palestine, even if we don't identify as being Palestinian. Why we should be standing with the indigenous people, and why we acknowledge and try to give honor to them because we are on their land, using their resources. Why we acknowledge African ancestors, because without them, we would literally not be here. Because we all know that Africa is the cradle of civilization, right? The birth of civilization. So just having these kind of conversations, it's important to note that folks that were not born in the US were always mindful of what was happening during the civil rights era. This is what they talk about. When you hear speeches from Fidel Castro, when you hear speeches from Kwame Nkrumah, when you hear speeches from other comrades who were born outside of this space, there were always influences that were happening. I talked to you all, I think it was last weekend, I might be getting my weeks confused, but we talked about Carlotta Lusumi, and we also talked about some of her comrades who helped to organize one of the largest slave revolts in Matanzas on the island of Cuba. But what you also may remember from that presentation was I also said that there were other slave revolts happening around the time that Carlotta and the comrades organized to do the massive one where they were taking lives and she was holding the machete in the photo. And I think that that's important to mention because no one is independent on their own. No one can make change on their own. No one can do anything that affects mass groups of people by themselves. It just doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. We have to continue to think about all the different ways that we all have impacted one another. So this is why, the work that was happening in Cuba was impacting us, but at the same time, Fidel Castro was paying attention to what was happening in the US at that time during the 1960s. There's a connection there that's being made. There's a connection with Kwame Nkrumah and why he decided that he wanted to travel the world, because he wanted to get a better landscape and bird's eye view of what was happening to Africans. So this is why he went to school at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, so that he could get some more information and context. He also went to school in parts of Africa, yes, but he also went to school. He went to ministry school, and he also decided to pursue other degrees so that he could just get different exposures to that. Marcus Garvey traveled across the world, not just Jamaica. He traveled across the world, and he saw that no matter where he was going, Africans were struggling financially, health-wise. They were struggling economically. They were struggling emotionally. He noticed that. Even Ernesto Che Guevara traveled the entire country and saw with his medical skills that people were in desperate need of medical attention. This is why he created the Motorcycle Diaries, because as he was traveling, he saw that children were starving. He saw that parents couldn't afford food for their kids. He saw that parents were giving their kids their last food and the parents were starving because they were trying to give their all to their children. And this is why he decided there needs to be a change. I can't just become a doctor because I'm not really addressing the underlying issue. The underlying issue is that people have economic barriers and boundaries in place that are preventing them from being healthy. And I totally agree with that. This is why I went into public health as well. So, like, we got to think a little bit deeper about this. And I think it's really important to mention that, because whether it was Mississippi, whether it was Memphis, whether it was Chile, whether it was Ghana, whether it was different parts of the Congo or Algeria, like it really doesn't matter. These issues are consistent with a consistent enemy, you all. And the sooner that we all learn that, the sooner that we all learn that there is a consistent enemy, it goes by the name of imperialism. But sometimes that enemy has a best friend by the name of capitalism. The sooner that we all realize that, it'll be a lot more simpler, because we won't have to take as much time educating one another on this. We could simply just move forward and figure out ways that we can increase our political education so that we can create some stamina against it and actually resist it and fight back. Next slide, please. It's also really bringing back some memories for me, because one of my favorite trips that my dad and I took while I still lived down there was we drove to Philadelphia, Mississippi. And he walked me through, we went to the ditch where some of our African ancestors were murdered because of what was happening at that time with their efforts with either the Lowndes County initiative I just mentioned, or some other work that they were doing. And hopefully you can correct me if you know what I'm talking about. But I think that it's still important to even kind of think about that, because these places are also built on trauma. They're built on harm. They're built on legacy. They're built on fighting. They're built on resisting. You can feel the energy when you walk into these spaces. If you're quiet enough and if you're humble enough, it's there. You can feel it. So being able to kind of think through this a little bit, being able to think about all the things that they were navigating, but they still understood that not only was this right and they had an opportunity to change this, but they wanted a better way. They wanted a different outcome. And acknowledging their bravery has impacted all of us today, because had they not been in the position to do the freedom rides, had they not been in the position to do the sit-ins, none of us would be able to operate in the same way that we're operating in today. They literally moved the needle and changed how people were treated, which affected queer identifying individuals. It affected non-male individuals and how they were treated. It affected differently abled individuals. You all have got to see how this is all connected. You have got to see it, especially because we're all fighting the same enemy. Speaking of non-male and marginalized genders, women also played a very critical role in the leadership in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee work. And so just highlighting this beautiful photo that we see here on the left. So starting from the far left, we have Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. We also have Ethel Minor in the middle. And then we have Kwame Nkrumah. And this picture was taken in Guinea-Conakry, right? And so just moving forward with the initial foundation of Ella Baker's contribution and creating a space for students to be able to organize, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was created because of Ms. Fannie Lou Hamer's courageous stand against a violent white supremacy situation that took place in Mississippi, that was created and designed to assert her for voting rights for women like Miss Ruby Doris Smith Robinson and Miss Ethel Minor. Excuse me, my allergies, y'all. This system is messed up. We should not be breathing in this air. It's not good for us. Who made major contributions to the student nonviolent movement towards the Black Power movement, which was also the contribution of women, and that's unquestionable. And I also just want to connect really quickly. I said this earlier, but the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee contributed greatly to, I would say, a major artery of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. One of the first readings that you have to complete when you join work study is a brochure that was written by the party, and we adapted it because of some work from Miss Ethel Minor. This brochure takes a clear position on why Pan-Africanism should and always will be anti-Zionist. And I'm very thankful to Miss Ethel Minor for taking that position. And then for people in the party to have read that and, clearly getting the connections from Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee members like Kwame Ture, for example, to be able to be exposed to something like that, because now the party has also adopted that. Now we have taken that position. And there was very few literature at that time when that brochure was released that was taking that position. As I said, imperialism is a major oppressor that we all are fighting, and imperialism feeds very much into Zionism. So to have taken that position to be against that at that time was very risky, very, very risky. But Miss Ethel Minor knew right was right and knew that there was something that needed to be done. Also, to be able to make those connections to how being a socialist does not equate to being a Zionist, I think is also really important when we think about the larger scope. And I'm calling out the fact that there are several people who identify as being socialists, but they are very much Zionists, which to me is an oxymoron. And I would allow us to think about that a little bit more and to really break that down, because ultimately, if you are a socialist, then that means that you believe that people should have equitable distribution of materials, resources. They shouldn't want for things. They should be able to acknowledge and take responsibility, represent how they're going to contribute, acknowledge what their skill sets are, and to be able to exercise those, to be able to organize how to use their skill sets to contribute to a larger economic system that very much acknowledges and benefits all of humanity that are within that system to function. People don't have basic needs like Maslow because everybody has what they need. And more importantly, we understand that the way we keep people having what they need is to protect the resources that we have in place, to make sure that there is rationing, to make sure that people are not being individualistic or selfish, and instead to make sure that there is a collective understanding that everything we do is for the people. So how are you going to have that mindset and believe that occupied Palestine should continue to have people on that land who are not Palestinian, as well as controlling the resources and continuing to kill massive Palestinians every single day? Those two do not equate. But you should be surprised at how many socialist people are actually Zionists. People who are pro labor unions are Zionists. People who are pro being anti-patriarchal and are Zionists. Those two do not compute, you all. And the sooner that we start to bring in these difficult conversations, the sooner we start to call out the contributions and the inequities, the sooner that we start to hold people accountable and have struggle, even if it makes us uncomfortable, the better off we will all be. This is not going to work if there is still a threat to justice anywhere. And as Dr. King pointed out, it's still going to be a threat. Injustice is still a threat to justice anywhere. We have got to figure that out. And so thank you to Miss Ella Baker. Thank you to Miss Ethel Minor. Without them, we still would not have a clear understanding of why anti-Zionism is the road to Pan-Africanism. And because of that, there is an avenue of socialism that we can continue to walk. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, Santisana, Ngoni. Thank you very much. Just 3 quick points, just to clarify. First, if we define someone being a socialist by their work, people can say all kind of stuff. But people tell me all the time I'm a socialist, and my first question to them is, what socialist organization you're a part of? Because socialism is an action. So you can't say I'm a brain surgeon, and it's just in your head, and you don't have any training on conducting brain surgery. That if you said that to people and they knew you didn't have any training, you would seem insane to them. Well, to us, you seem insane saying I'm a socialist and you're not a part of a socialist organization. So anyone who's committed to socialist principles and values would understand that, and they couldn't be Zionists. If they're Zionists, they were never a socialist. The two are incompatible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in regards to this picture on this screen. So what you're looking at in this picture is not just Kwame Ture, Ethel Minor, and Kwame Nkrumah. You're looking at 3 of the initial organizers for the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. And I just want to make that absolutely clear. Kwame Nkrumah was the founder of the APRP. The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that he wrote in 1968 clearly illustrates that, pages 56 to page 60. He talks and calls for the creation of the AAPRP and the All African Committee for Political Command and the All African People's Revolutionary Army. So he was in the first work study circle in Guinea Conakry with Kwame Ture, who was then Stokely Carmichael. Both of them had assignments that they worked to carry out. And those of you that know Kwame Ture know that he carried out this assignment because you probably saw him coming to speak on behalf of the APRP, which was his assignment, which was to build up the APRP in the Western Hemisphere. And the reason why Shakur and I and everybody else in the party in the Western Hemisphere is here is because of that vision that Nkrumah and Kwame Ture had. And Ethel Minor was on the original leadership body for the APRP after her and Kwame Ture came out of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So that's important to understand that. And then the third thing is, so Lowndes County is in Alabama, and that was the SNCC work in 1965. Which led to the creation of the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which was the original Black Panther Party. And we've talked about that. If you don't know that history, you should go back and look at that presentation. It's all there for you to see. And Philadelphia, Mississippi is obviously in Mississippi. And that was where SNCC and the Congress of Racial Equality, we've also talked about the Confederated organizations. The organizations had to work together because there weren't enough people, contrary to the myth that there were thousands of people involved in the civil rights movement. That's not true. There were never enough people, so the organizations had to work together. And the three civil rights workers who were working in the Philadelphia, Mississippi area were James Chaney, the African who was in SNCC, the European Andrew Goodman, who was in CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, and the other European, Michael Schwerner, who was also in CORE. And the three of them were working together, and they disappeared in Philadelphia, Mississippi. They were killed by the sheriff's department there, as well as they were also members of the Ku Klux Klan. And Roy Mitchell, who was the FBI agent assigned to that case, did nothing. And he was the one that set up William O'Neill to sabotage Fred Hampton in Chicago 5 years later. So just wanted to clarify that and give you some additional information. And we'll go back to Ruby Doris's origins. So she was born in Atlanta in 1942. She grew up under, obviously, the racist segregation system that existed there. And she engaged in daily resistance. And that's important to state because a lot of us accept the narratives of our enemies. And our enemies perpetuate this nonsense that we just, were oppressed and we just accepted it and we just prayed to Jesus and we just accepted being brutalized. That's a bunch of bullshit. We never did that. Our people always resisted. I remember my father talking about when he was growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, during that same period, that he and his friends would intentionally go and drink out of the white-only water fountains and run. The Europeans would come and chase them and shake their fists at them and call them all kind of names, and they would do it consistently. They would consistently use the bathrooms. And this was widespread. You got to understand that. Our people are human beings. We have agency and dignity. We're not going to just accept no oppression like that and sit down and pray to a God that doesn't even exist if it's not doing anything to support us in terms of fighting against that oppression. You can believe fairy tales if you want to, but we are not that stupid as a people. We are going to resist. And the God we believe in is going to give us courage and energy to resist. And that's what we did. So we got to stop all this. Oh, we just sat there and prayed that we wouldn't get our asses kicked. That's you. Because you're a damn coward. That is not our people's legacy. That's not our history anywhere on the planet Earth. So let's put that to bed right now. We consistently resisted Jim Crow segregation and every other form of colonialism and segregation that we faced. Apartheid, whatever the hell it is, we resisted it. And that was conducted. It's largely been written out of history that we did that. And in 1959, Ruby Doris enrolled at Spelman College, historically African University in Atlanta, for historically for women. And it was there that she developed and honed her student activism. And it was there at Spelman that she made the decision to join the Student Nonviolent Coordinating, or not at Spelman, but she made the decision during the conference at Shaw University in 1960, but it was at Spelman that she began to activate her SNCC work. And they engaged in work designed to dismantle racist Jim Crow segregation. And Ruby Doris spent a lot of time on the front line engaging in that work in the Atlanta area. And some of her early work in SNCC, it solidified her reputation among her organizing peers. And especially because this African woman consistently, even though she was in her early 20s, navigated serious health issues the entire time that she was an activist, serious health issues. There were many days where she could barely have the strength to get out of bed, but she found the energy to do that. She found her faith. She found her energy. This is important that we understand this, because if you're going to have a faith, this is how you need to use it. It needs to give you inspiration to fight back in conditions when you just don't have that energy about you to do that. That's where your faith comes in. Any faith that you have that's focused around buying you a goddamn house, that ain't no faith. That's just you're aspiring to be capitalism and you're playing capitalist rules. You're going by all their rules so you can be rewarded like the good slave that you are. That's all that is. That has nothing to do with faith. And any punk ass God that's about that, I don't want, send me straight to hell. If I drop dead right now, send me to hell if you're telling me I need to believe in some punk ass God that is all about material possessions and material advancement and individual advancement. It has absolutely nothing to do with fighting against the forces of injustice. I would rather burn in hell than be a part of a punk ass God like that. And I know some of you, oh my God, good. I hope you get a damn heart attack, because we got to stop all this damn cowardice and all this bullshit and start standing on the same level of principle that these people were talking to you about stood on. Because if they would have been the kind of goddamn cowards that a lot of us are today, you'd be on the slave plantation right now. The only reason why you're not is because they had courage that you don't have anywhere in your body. So we're going to do one of two things. We're either going to whip you into finding that courage wherever the hell it is, or we're going to move you out the goddamn way. We don't have any time to deal with this kind of nonsense that's going on out here. We got to get serious about doing something for our future generations. And the reason why we talk about people like Ruby Doris is she should serve as an inspiration. She should serve as an inspiration. For example, she became legendary when her and her SNCC workers attempted to integrate one of the few hospitals available for hours in rural Georgia. In other words, if African people got sick, this was the only hospital that they can go if they didn't want to die. And oftentimes the way this hospital, because they were the only hospital, they didn't just say, well, we're just openly segregated, but what they would say is you can't, because they have to do certain things to ensure they get the federal funding, right? So what they would instead say is that you have to be really sick to come here to this hospital, right? You can't just come there because you have a flu. We won't admit Africans if that's all you have. You have to really have a serious injury or illness before we'll even consider seeing you, right? So what Ruby Doris and her SNCC workers did in this hospital is they came and told the European staff that she needed to be admitted. And the European staff people told the SNCC people that they didn't look sick. And Ruby responded by asking if they were sick, would they get admitted? The hospital workers said only if they were sick enough, and Ruby promptly vomited all over the floor. Now, this was not something where she stuck something in her throat. She staged it. This woman was ill, you all. She was constantly vomiting. And just like Ernesto Che Guevara fighting in the battlefield with asthma, she didn't let that stop her from making a contribution. Now, some of you get a damn ingrown toenail and you're done. The minute somebody raises their voice above a whisper towards you, you're done. You can't do it anymore. These people had integrity, God damn it. And they stood up despite whatever personal challenges they had. That's the story of faith. That's what a worthwhile faith would do for you. That's what a worthwhile ideology would do for you. I don't have the faith part, but I do have the ideology part. And I put my ideological commitment against any goddamn body, anywhere, to see what you would do. If somebody come in with some guns talking about they're going to kill your people, kill the people there, see what your faith drives you to do. I know what my ideology will drive me to do. I've done it. So this is what we're talking about here. And without even skipping a beat, after vomiting all over the floor, Ruby Doris looked at the white people and said, is that sick enough for you to allow me to be admitted? Most of you wouldn't have the courage to do that. Don't lie. I know you wouldn't have the courage. And her courage and commitment led her to become SNCC's executive secretary. And she coordinated SNCC's groundwork in their campaign. So what that meant, not only was she the only woman to ever hold that position in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, but what that job entailed for her is that the workers who were in the field doing the work for SNCC, her job was to ensure that they got the resources they need. If they were arrested, SNCC had a policy of jail, no bail, but to ensure that they had legal representation, right? She had to run around and raise the money to hire attorneys to represent them. She had to run around and raise money to rent cars, to drive down and see about people, to do the work. She had to organize resources, but she had to spend all day doing that. Many of us today, we do it for 20 minutes, but I can't do it no more. I'm tired. She did that all the time, every day, behind the scenes. When she was no longer out there in the field, she coordinated to make sure everyone had the resources they needed. The March Against Fear, the Black Power March in June of 1966 in Mississippi. Y'all don't do the actual work, a lot of you, so you don't know this. When they didn't just start the march in Memphis or at the point where James Meredith was shot and march all the way to Jackson, Mississippi without stopping. They marched several hours a day. Then they stopped somewhere. So Ruby Doris was responsible. Where are all these hundreds of people going to stay? What resources would be available to them for lodging, for food? Her responsibility was to facilitate all that. A number of the people needed to go out in front of the march to organize people so that they would be prepared once the march came to them. This was one of the jobs of such brave and courageous organizers in SNCC, like Brother Mukasa Dada, who is still with us, still fired up, still doing the work today, still one of my mentors. He was Willie Ricks then. He would go out to the sharecroppers and talk to them about Black Power and talk to them. And this was dangerous work. These were places that were infested like roaches with the KKK. And he went out there on his own with a couple other people, and they did this work on their own. They didn't have anybody with them. They didn't have anybody watching their back. They were doing the work because they had courage and dignity, God damn it. I'm going to drive that point home. You can click off if you want to. I don't care. If you do that, you weren't meant to be here in the first place. You just came for whatever reason. I don't know what reason. Only you and your God know why you came. But we're going to talk about truth here. That's what we do here. So if you're new here, then get used to that. I know you're not used to that because, your truth is your truth and my bullshit. Truth is objective. And we're talking about objective truth here. That's what we're talking about right now. So this is what her job was in SNCC, you all. That march I just mentioned, the March Against Fear, the Black Power March, she had to organize when they had, if you know the story, they went to the schoolhouse in Canton, Mississippi. And the police officials didn't want them to stay there. The white officials, racist to the core, they didn't want them to stay there. And Ruby did the work to get the black school board to agree to let the marchers stay on the ground. This was the work that she had to do behind the scenes. And then the people came and said, no, they still can't stay there, even though they overruled the school board, even though they had no authority to do so. So now they have to make a decision in the heat of it. And the police told them, if you stay here, we're going to arrest everybody. And they had to make a decision. And her job was to be a key voice, even though she wasn't physically there. A lot of you make these, well, I can't go, so I can't do nothing. She wasn't physically there, but her job was to make a key decision in determining what they would do. And they got on the phone and they talked back and forth because they didn't have the type of cell service that you have today. They had to do work to make sure everybody was communicated with. You call one person, you get their perspective, you hang up. You call somebody else, you get their perspective, you hang up. You call the first person back again to tell them what the second person said. This is the kind of work these people did, you all. And here you got a phone where you can talk, you got Zoom where you can talk to 100 people and you can't get 2 people to talk about a damn thing. You can't get 2 people on there to talk about the same thing for more than 5 seconds before it goes all straight to hell. I mean, and these people did all this work with nothing. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves today. We should feel shame for our inability to do more than what we're doing right now. We should look in the mirror. Each and every one of us should go stand in front of a mirror right now, look at it and say, you aren't worth a goddamn. We should do that because we are not living up to our responsibility. And I don't care if you get mad. I hope you do get mad. I'm mad. Shit. You should join the club, goddammit. You should be mad. At least we can get you mad at something. These people bombing the hell out of everybody around the world, and the only thing you talk about, I want to get a Long Island iced tea. Hell, we want to make you mad. You damn right we want to make you. At least we can know that you're human if you get angry about this. At least we know you're still breathing. So we want to do that. So this is the work that this woman did, and she was one of the key voices in that conversation that y'all need to stay at the school board, no matter what the people said. And no, everybody knew. I don't know what some of you think because of how you live your life. Well, she wasn't there, so she could say that. But everybody in SNCC knew that Ruby Doris wasn't afraid of a goddamn thing. She wasn't no coward like a lot of us today. So they knew that if she could be there, she would have been there. But if you know anything about strategy, you always want to make sure you have some people who are not there so that they can make sure that they organize resources for the people that are there. That's just common sense. And any good organizer knows that. So clearly that was her role. And it was a very critical role. And you always need to have people who perform that task. And that's what she did for SNCC. So her contributions, Ruby Doris's contributions. First, we should talk about she was a part of a major, significant part of SNCC's movement to the left in the 60s. You know, SNCC started out under the influence of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and all the other Southern Baptist ministers. And that had a lot to do with the whole dominance of the philosophy of nonviolence. But we've talked a lot. You should look at it if you haven't seen it. We talked a lot about how the SNCC organizers, they work differently than the people in SCLC. They work differently than Dr. King. Dr. King would come through for a big event because, people treated him like a celebrity. Nothing against him. He didn't ask for that. But I'm just saying the objective reality is that he would come through and do speeches where all these people would come hear him speak, and then he would leave. He may get arrested. He may do that. He certainly made sacrifices. I'm not saying he didn't. There was some black coon with a video I watched before I got on here talking about Martin Luther King was a plant. Martin Luther King was a plant. And I wrote to him, I said, Martin Luther King sacrificed more for our people with his farts than you will your entire life. You stop talking about Dr. King. You don't know, whoever paid you, they're not paying you enough. So we respect Dr. King, but he was a mobilizer. He came through, gave the speech, and for the most part, that was his work. He left. The SNCC organizers came under the radar. They were not in the media like Dr. King was. They went to people's houses and did day-to-day organizing work, talking to people, getting people to come to meetings, getting people to carry out tasks, working to build capacity. And you can't do that work in a violent environment if you're in the news every day. The Klan would find you and hang you, lynch you. So you have to work under the radar. So because SNCC workers did that, they saw the raw terror that our people experience on a day-to-day basis when the media wasn't there. in Mississippi. They saw that. They live with that. And that is the reason why SNCC workers became more and more radicalized. That's the reason why that happened. Black power didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of them understanding, as Kwame Ture said, I have it right on my wall here, in order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. As long as in order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. All of the SNCC people who are on the ground dealing with that raw terror every day, they understood that. And they understood that it's a waste of time to be trying to appeal to an enemy that has no moral conscience, that has no morality, that's basically a soulless being. The United States of America is a soulless entity. Everybody that supports the United States of America is a soulless entity. Everybody who calls themselves any type of American is choosing to be a soulless entity. There is no way around that. I don't care how much it hurts people's feelings. There's no way around that. SNCC understood this 60 years ago. Some of you won't understand it for another 60 years. They understood it 60 years ago. And that's why Ruby Doris was a part of the delegation that was selected from SNCC to travel to Guinea-Conakry on the invitation of the Democratic Party of Guinea and President Ahmed Sékou Touré in 1964. She was there in the picture along with the brother to her right, Cleve Sellers. He's the father of that clown that's on CNN, Bakari Sellers. If you ever watch that, I don't know what happened between father and I don't know why the father was one of the most militant people in the movement and the son is an apologist for everything capitalist, but that's none of my business. But anyway, there were other people that went on that delegation. Robert Moses, for example, was there. James Foreman was there. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer went to Guinea. And we've talked about that. We've talked about how the trip to Guinea radicalized the SNCC organizers. After going to Guinea and seeing African people with dignity, representing us as African people, and then also having the opportunity to be treated as diplomatic guests to sit at the table with President Touré. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer talked about it. This is a woman with a third-grade education who was a sharecropper in Mississippi, who sat next to President Ahmed Sékou Touré, and he talked to her through an interpreter and gave her a hug. And she was like, this is a woman who the leaders in this country wouldn't even deal with Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. They wouldn't even give her an audience. And so after experiencing that in Guinea-Conakry, there was no way these Africans could come back here and accept this kind of substandard treatment. And this is where the Black Power movement came from. So don't stand here and tell us, well, Africa never did it. You sound like a goddamn fool if you believe that. Don't sit here and tell us that. We know our history. We know better. We're not like you where we just rely on PhDs from YouTube. We study history. We know what happened. We know they went to Guinea. We know they came back stronger. Even John Lewis, who was on that delegation, who would never be confused as a militant, he even said that I could tell it changed the attitude of the SNCC people. And 2 years later, when he was defeated by Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael then to become chair of SNCC, he referenced it. I knew from when I went to Guinea that things were changing. He recognized that. He understood this was 60 years ago. So this is what happens. And with the rise and influence of the Black Power movement, Rui became a part of SNCC's emerging militant leadership. People like Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael then, Mukasa Dada, James Foreman, Cleve Sellers, Ruby, and others were a part of that executive committee. And some of them were not on that, but they were the people who were now governing SNCC. These were the folks that you're looking at here who decided in 1967 to adopt Ethel Miner's paper and make SNCC an anti-Zionist organization. They were the ones. And when they did that, they knew that their funding would dry up, and it certainly did after they did that. But again, these were people, young people, who acted on dignity. They didn't act on fear and selfishness like a lot of us today. They acted on dignity, goddammit. Learn what the hell that word means. Some of us really need to understand what that word means. They acted on dignity because that's basically disappeared in this society today, other than a few people. And we need to get that back. We are going to get it back. So sadly, Ruby Doris's health challenges. I mean, this is a sister. She was so influenced by going to Guinea, she named her son Sekou. But sadly, her health challenges resulted in her losing her battle. She had cancer. She had it the whole time. In 1967, she was only 25 years old when she lost her life. And she went down fighting. Nobody even knew she was near death. She kept fighting to organize and stick until she just physically couldn't do it anymore. So these are the people that I look to when I get discouraged. And I don't stay discouraged very long because I know if they can deal with what they have to deal with, I damn sure am going to deal with what I got to deal with. And you should be looking at it the same way. Oh, I know I'm demoralized. This happened. I can't do it. You weren't going to do it anyway. We need people who are willing to fight through adversity. This is not going to be easy. This work is never going to be easy for us. We need people who are going to be like Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. And if you're that person, we are looking for you. We need you. Your people need you. Ruby Doris is gone physically, but her legacy will live and inspire us forever. She was a strong voice against anti-patriarchy in SNCC, and we need that today. So we live and we respect her. I never had a chance to meet her. I was 5 years old when she made her physical transition, but she has lived with me my whole life and will continue to do that. And I thank her for her contribution. And the best way to thank her is to continue her work. And to the best of our ability, that's what we're struggling to do. So we do thank you for joining us. We ask you to join us next week. We're going to continue in this Women's History Month by honoring unknown women. And so next week, we're going to talk about Marilyn Buck, a European woman, a principal accomplice to African liberation. If you know about Assata Shakur, you owe gratitude to Marilyn Buck, as well as Sekou Odinga and a whole lot of other Africans as well. We did a whole program on that, but most people don't know about Marilyn Buck, so we're going to talk about her next week. So we really encourage you to join us. The QR code in the upper left, the red and white one, AAPRP programs, Forward Ever, shop. You can buy materials, clothing, hoodies, shirts that support the African Revolution. Please do that. And if you've already done it, we thank you, but we ask you to tell others so that they know. We ask you to tell others so that they can support this work. And if you're in the Sacramento area, we invite you to come to our community defense class every Thursday night. It's at 6 to 8 p.m. If you're not here, tell people that are. Come on out. It's 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage, like cottage cheese way, 15, Unit 15 in Sacramento. We will help you understand basic self-defense moves. We will also help you understand self-defense techniques, and we will also exercise your mind. We had a discussion last week. We're supporting this work to support Cuba. So we had a discussion last week about the Cuban Revolution, and we'll probably continue that for a couple of weeks. We'll talk about Iran. We'll talk about everything. That's what we do there. So we invite you to join us if you're in the area, and please let people know if you're not. And then we want to tell you that on April 6th, if you're also in this area, we're having a report back event on my January 2026 trip to Azania, South Africa. And we're going to focus on 3 questions during that report back. That's going to be also 6 to 8 p.m. at the same location, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15 here in Sacramento. So it'll be worthwhile. We'll have some food for you, but we're going to focus on 3 questions. You know, how do people in Africa truly view us here in the U.S.? That's a question that has a simple answer. It needs to be put to bed. So we're going to talk to you about that in concrete terms. We're also going to talk about the apartheid system in Azania, South Africa. Did it end in 1994, as we've been told, or what's really happening there today? I was there 2 months ago, so I'm preparing an analysis to demonstrate to you what's happening here today with that. And then what does Africa mean to us? Like, what does it mean to us? in the US. Like, why is it important? We're gonna build that bridge for you. So come on out to that event. Join the APRP, aprp-intl.org. Again, we're looking for the Ruby Doris Smith Robinson people. You know, if you're somebody that just, well, all I want to do is just come in and complain, then go somewhere, go to the FBI and do that. Join the FBI or the police and just be a damn a headache for them. Do that for them. Don't come to us with that nonsense. We got better things to do. The QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, support our work in Africa, in the Sahel region. Please do that. We're organizing there on a consistent basis. Become a monthly sponsor to support that work. In my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. In the upper right, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. There's a QR code next to that. Scan that. It's only $8. It's if I do say so myself. And if you don't believe me, there are about 60 reviews of the book there, and the people, I don't know them, they will tell you that it's a great organizing book. And also 100% of the proceeds go towards the anti-fascist work that we're engaged in, including the self-defense classes, among other things. So thank you for joining us. Forward ever, stay strong. Don't believe what these people are saying. We are winning. Enjoy the rest of your day.